We are raised and our mothers were raised to be good, well behaved women. And good and well behaved women don't have conflict, they don't have interpersonal strife, they avoid it. I'm Gabby, and you're listening to While I've Got You. Let's start the show. Last 6 or so months, I've had so many people reach out to me to tell me about some new rift in their other friend groups, ask me to proofread a text message, or really just unpack a huge blow up between them and another person in another friend group. Sometimes they're mutual friends. It doesn't matter. Point is, I think it's really flattering and truly the honor of my life to be someone that people come to when they need help navigating conflict, especially when it comes to friendships. And especially because it's not something that I feel super confident about my ability to do myself. When I think about conflict within friendships, the options typically boil down to really just two things in my mind. Either address the situation and ask for what I need, or adapt and move on. Now, sometimes me addressing the situation means I'm saying, hey, that thing you said I didn't really love. And sometimes it looks like me asking for what I need to say, hey, I actually need you to show up for me in this way. And moving on doesn't always mean ghosting. Sometimes it means adapting my expectations of that person or adapting the roles that I was hoping that we would play in this dynamic. Sometimes adapting means quietly shifting away. And all of those options, however they're paired together, is complicated. And it can be hard to determine if you go and ask for what you need and you choose the path of addressing whatever tension or conflict or internal thing you have going on in this friendship, there's always the possibility that that conversation can leave scars. I had a friend years ago say something really hurtful after I tried to express how I was feeling in our friendship. And while I never brought it up again and I don't necessarily hold it against them, it has become this unconscious reminder of how my expectations have changed and how I can't and don't want to show up as my full self anymore. Even in that scenario, maybe I didn't and am not continuing to manage or navigate my way through that friendship the best. I chose a two-pronged approach. I asked for what I needed. I chose to address it, and in the end, still needed to adapt my expectations and my behaviors in that relationship. I think the other place that maybe I'm screwing up when it comes to navigating this is that when I get to a place of feeling resolved, usually because I'm not received in a way that I want to be received, especially when I'm doing something that is difficult and scary and vulnerable. I'm either not received in a way that I want to be received in, or I'm met with defensiveness, or something just isn't right. I run out of energy. I can't keep rehashing or trying to make my point be seen. So I get to a place of being very resolved. And once I get to that place, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I've said my piece. You didn't hear me. And so now the ball feels like it's back in my court. And I have to decide if moving on looks like me adjusting to this new dynamic that has been created in our friendship, or it looks like me drifting away. Both are significant choices and both take a lot of emotional work, regardless of what I think I'm doing and how I think this is going to be better and easier. It takes a lot of work. I think when I started outlining and working on talking in this episode, I kept thinking about what it was like to outgrow friendships and how that could be seen as the root cause for these shifts. In fact, the original theme behind this was the quiet guilt of outgrowing friends. And the more that I thought about it and the more that I worked through my own friendships, the way I show up as a friend, the way people looked to me as a friend. I started to not really enjoy the way outgrow felt. It's not always the right term. I think it implies that someone has elevated and become better and another person has remained stagnant. And maybe that's the case in some situations, but I don't think that it has been representative of the way that I have handled friendships that have shifted and changed. I think it's probably better to say we grew differently or we grew at a different rate. And so I wanted to dress more of my behavior in it and challenge and encourage you to do the same. I think when it comes to these situations where you and someone else or you and a group of people are growing at a different rate or growing in different directions, the real tough part is trying to determine what about this friendship is salvageable and when you hit a point where it's not. Two things can absolutely be true: that losing the opportunity or that possibility to have any more of those good times that made this friendship something special and something important in your life is heartbreaking and is a tough decision and comes with a lot of its own emotions. And it's also true that staying in something that doesn't serve you and continues to let you down and disappoint you has its own set of emotions and is also heartbreaking. I think the guilt and shame, and maybe the reason why it feels easier to quietly shift away versus showing up and speaking on it and hoping that things can be worked through, even when there's conflict or tension or you're going through a rough patch, is because in a lot of ways we've been conditioned to expect unbreakable and unshakable friend groups. Like from the cheetah girls to living single to girlfriends, even when there are big rifts, there is always something that brings you back together. There's not quiet shifts of growing apart. There is only huge drag out, knockdown fights, and that's not realistic either. My aunt has this sort of core group of girlfriends that she's had my whole life. And when I asked her how has that friend group, how have those relationships remained intact and what is the secret to long-lasting female friendship? She said it's giving grace to the people you love. You tend to give a little more grace to the people that you love, and you just see them through all of it. Even in the bad times, even when you know better, they know better, even when people are doing foolish stuff or you're doing foolish things, you still show up for those moments as well. And I think that that's beautiful. But I also don't think that that is a blanket tool or skill set that we've been taught how to do, how to show extra grace, how to stick around for the tough parts, how to carry the load a little bit more when your friend needs it. I think we see so many jokes about male friendships and how men just have friends for forever because they don't talk about anything. They go, they hang out, they don't share anything intricate or personal about themselves. They watched the game stereotypically and throw back a beer, and that's the end of that. We'll see you for the next sports ball. And then on the flip side of that, we see conversations about male loneliness epidemic. But I think that there's a piece in there too that we don't talk about where women aren't really taught or given these skills either. We're never really taught how to have long lasting friendships. I think this is in part because we are raised and our mothers were raised to be good, well behaved women. And good and well behaved women don't have conflict, they don't have interpersonal strife, they avoid it. And so now, as a younger millennial Gen Z cusp, that'll be the first and last time you hear me call myself a Gen Z cusp. I identify as millennial. Thank you. As a younger millennial, we and the generations that come after us, in addition to having to develop a skill set that our moms didn't teach us because they didn't know themselves or know how to teach us, we also have so much more access to language and resources that have made this sort of hyper independence or surface level sisterhood a type of armor that we wear that protects us from the very real consequences our female ancestors experienced or had to consider when it came to being dependent on another person. I think maybe I've talked a lot about how I have a hard time in this area, and I don't want to move so directly into here's some solid advice for the thing that I don't do that well. But I do want to name two policies that I try to follow and that have helped me move from there is no choice. If you disrespect me or I feel slighted, I cut you off into we got options on how we address this moving forward. And those two policies are I'm not allowed to be mad at anybody that doesn't know that I'm mad. If someone has hurt my feelings, I can't, although it sounds great, I can't say they should know better than to treat me that way because that's not fair. Everyone is different. And so I'm not allowed to be mad at anybody that doesn't know I'm mad. And kind of flowing into my next personal policy is I have to ask for what I need. And I think if I don't do those two things, at some point in my head, when I am dealing with all the emotions that are like, cut them off. You don't need this kind of negativity. You don't need this person in your life. Just shut them down, cut them off. I have to take a step back and say, does this person know why I'm mad? I need to tell them to give them the opportunity to address it if they so choose. And if I know what I need from this friendship and from that interaction, I have to be able to voice that as well. And I've sort of given myself the permission that if I ask or explain how I'm feeling and nothing changes, they don't take accountability or they think I'm being dramatic or whatever their reasoning is. If I ask and they don't mean it, then the ball is back in my court. Whether that turns into a quiet shift or a bigger conversation, no matter what, leading up to that decision still comes with confusion, a lot of animosity, some hope, and all of it loops back into fear and guilt. Fear that maybe my delivery was wrong. Fear that I'm going to try to have a bigger conversation and I'm just going to get disappointed again. And then guilt because this is supposed to be easy. This is supposed to be natural and instinctive. Everyone wants to be seen, loved, desired. Everyone wants to have people to witness their life. And if I can't do this, what does that say about me? It is one of my most basic needs. It's a part of my hierarchy of needs. And if I can't do this well, how am I ever going to get to self-actualization? I think we have to also acknowledge that the decision doesn't always land one way or the other. Sometimes it's that like clean cutoff. A friend in college at the start of COVID who made some comments about coming to stay with me if she got COVID because I lived alone. And within like the same day, I asked if just she and I could do something for my birthday. And it was like, no, because COVID. And the COVID piece doesn't matter. COVID was a crazy time, whatever. I think in that conversation, she said something like, it's just a birthday. You're making a big deal about something that's not a big deal. Something along those lines. And I don't think we ever spoke again. I hope she's well. If you're listening to this, shout out to you, girl. Been a long time. I hope you and your family are well and healthy and safe. So sometimes it's like a clean cutoff and you just kind of move forward. Sometimes it's a years long separation, quiet, fading into the background. One of my oldest, longest friends that I've had, we had what felt like at the time a huge falling out in college. I don't remember any of the details or any of the specifics about it. What felt like this huge falling out at the beginning of college, and then I was in her wedding 4 years ago. So I think there's even that option where things feel like a clean cutoff and then time. There's the element of time that heals all wounds. And then sometimes you address it, you work up the courage, you say, hey, I'm confused and this is how I need to feel. I need to understand what is happening. And that opportunity, that vulnerability, that clarity is met beautifully in the moment. And it is something as simple as a misunderstanding and things get cleared right on up. And of course, these various outcomes and the various outcomes that maybe you've experienced over a long life of ups and downs in friendships doesn't further complicate the question of do I address it or do I adapt? it makes the potential answer that much more complicated. I won't pretend like I'm not getting better and improving because I am hopeful and I think that I am. And my instinct to just adapt, whether it be adapt my behaviors or adapt my expectations and move on, is still very real. And it takes a very conscious effort for me to pause. And I think the more that I am in situations where I'm having to pause, I'm noticing more and more that I am being called to a level of vulnerability that I haven't had to revisit or be in a very long time. I am a Cancer sun and a Cancer moon. And so I feel everything at profound depths. And I mean everything. But I'm also a Capricorn rising. I'm also an earth sign. I have an earth sign in there, my big three. And so my default isn't to sit in that emotion and sit in that feeling in any outward expression. My first instinct is to mask how I'm feeling, to explain it away or process it through logic, to present a outward appearance of self-sufficiency, and to keep a very tight control over how people perceive me. It is why I think my friends that know me are comfortable coming to me and saying, "You read this message. This girl at my gym is being a weirdo." Like, it's why I think it's why people feel comfortable coming to me is that earth sign and the way that I honestly prevent myself from being vulnerable and open about my emotions with other people to both control how people see me and also avoid having to process things too deeply. I won't leave it all to the birth chart. I also have ADHD because, of course, I do. And my particular flavor of the ADHD has a layer of rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which means even little slights, tiny little slights, feel like very big blows. And I think at some point, whether intentional or not, I think people made me feel like my vulnerability was annoying or my vulnerability was too much. And so I started to believe them. And so I now have the language and I'm starting to recognize the ways in which when I try to step back into vulnerability again and share how I'm feeling, share how something has landed for me, if I am met with defensiveness, if I'm met with sort of getting brushed off or I'm ignored or I'm made to feel too much, I don't want to do it anymore. My instinct is to avoid contact, to retreat. I think because that level of retreating and how quickly I can get to that place of I was fine before, I'll be fine after. When it comes to my friendships and beyond that, just all of my relationships. I think because I've had so much of that experience and I've always been aware or somewhat concerned at the level and the quickness in which I can detach from someone, being able to have the language and identify it in the moment when it's happening is new and is something that I am and have been processing through this episode and outlining this episode and wanted to offer my experience as an opportunity to look at how you show up when it comes to conflict with your friends as well. I feel like this internal battle of is this a big enough thing for me to address or do I just let it happen and now I adapt? I just say, "Oh, that's so and so. They're always like that. They're always silly goofy." I think that question isn't a unique experience to me. I think it's very common, and my logical brain says, "Give them a chance. Tell them, address it. And if it's not working, then move on." And I'm aware that that sounds like advice, which is not the vibes of this podcast, but I want to highlight the nuance of that as well. That sacrificing an expectation is fine. And it's up to you to determine what expectations are sacrificable. What's not necessarily great is settling for less than what you actually want. Maybe it's not just that we accept the love that we think we deserve. I think maybe we also feed the love we desire. And if that love comes in crumbs or If that love disappoints, I think our desire to be loved is what makes us stick around. And when that energy shifts, or when the way that you have decided, okay, this is all I'm going to get, so I'm going to accept the love in this container, when that changes, the energy and the way that you can show up and what you'll accept is the first thing to go. I will end by saying I am not a fully recovered cutter offer, but I do think that I have clearer language to identify the pattern that I operate in, or the role, the script, the timeline that I operate in when it comes to conflict in my interpersonal relationships. The muddy part and the flaw in the system or my processing isn't in the question itself of what do I choose, it's in the choice. I personally don't always know if in that moment I am retreating and protecting myself, or if I am separating and for the greater good or for my boundaries or whatever, protecting the other person, especially when I'm choosing to adapt versus address the situation. Am I protecting myself to avoid the possibility that me being vulnerable and sharing how I'm feeling is not going to be held and received in the way that I need it to be? Or am I protecting the other person by not telling them about their behavior? I don't know. Sometimes I catch it and sometimes I don't. And for now, my goal isn't to choose the right thing every time. My goal right now is to notice what's actually motivating my choice either way, and staying open to the fact that regardless of that decision, time is going to be the thing that ultimately sorts it all out. Thank you guys so much for listening. I think this is probably one of my more vulnerable episodes, which is a thing that I mentioned I am being stretched and pushed to do. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks for listening.